All right, hello and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, Demopalooza, a Therefore Features Festival. I'm really pleased to be here today with both Francisco and Roman, who are my colleagues at Therefore, and we're going to be talking about some of the newest features in Therefore, showing a realistic working demo and explaining to you how to configure and use it. So of course, this is a webinar. I cannot see or hear you, but I do want to interact with you. So if you hover your mouse, you'll be able to see three dots within the Zoom controls. That's the Q&A function. If you have questions or comments, use the Q&A to get in contact with me and with Francisco and Roman as well. And we would really love to hear from you. So the objectives of today's webinar are to talk about the new features with a specific focus on the configuration side. So the name Demopalooza, it's kind of a silly name. It's a play on the word demo because I am presenting a demo. And then Lollapalooza. So Lollapalooza is the name of a music festival which takes place within the US, but also in Berlin and Paris. I think they've also done it. And it's an Old English word meaning a remarkable or wonderful thing. So of course, I do hope that this is a remarkable and wonderful webinar. Um, but it's also just a play on the idea that we're going to be bringing a lot of different features together to make a cohesive event, just like a music festival where you have multiple music artists coming together. And I thought it's just um, it's a fun theme for this summer webinar, something a little bit more exciting than just a standard kind of dry topic, right? So you can expect to see these features. I will explain how they are configured, and this should be a really interesting way to kind of put these newer features together. I know that we have, therefore, we have so many releases. There are so many features that come out with twice a year. It's oftentimes hard to remember which features came out. It's not easy to remember what all the features are or how to use them. And that is the objective, to really show these new features being used together and to get a working demonstration of how you can use them with your own system or with your customers. So what features are we going to be looking at? Number one, we're going to be looking at documentation updates because we all know that great configurations start with great documentation. And so we have my colleague Francisco Guerrero from the documentation team to guide you through the new changes and the enhancements that have been made. Then we'll do a quick demo of the user experience. And then I'll talk to you about the configuration details within the eForms, the workflow, REST call, and webhooks. So that is the objective and the content that you can expect to see. And we'll now start it right away. I'll hand off to Francisco here. Francisco is a member of the documentation team, and it's been really great to have him because together with Lisa, he has completely revamped our documentation. So all of our articles have been moved to a completely new website. They have been improved and rewritten. And overall, this makes the documentation better than ever before. So without further ado, Francisco, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the intro. And yeah, like you said, we've been migrating the help to a new platform. So I'm just going to share my my screen here so you can see. So this is our new help platform, and we launched it at the beginning of the year. And now that the majority of our content is over here, we thought it'd be a good timing to go over some of the advantages it'll have over the other help. So this is the homepage for the Therefore Online help. From here, you navigate to other resources very quickly, either through the side menu. You can continue to browse the help. So that's just good as usual. You can access other help guides, like for the on-premises help, release notes for the most recent versions of Therefore, and then also links to other advanced documentation, such as the additional resources page, and then also the API and Web API landing pages. Further down in this page, you can find access to our other digital content. So that's case studies, e-learning, our feedback form, etc. So this new online help, we revamped a lot of the topics and we rewrote a lot of material. But realistically speaking, it has much quicker browsing than the previous one. So opening and closing the topics on the site is much quicker than the old help. And it also lets users actually open things in a new tab, which was something the old help didn't let you do for some reason. And also lets you change languages while staying on a page. So for example, here I opened our therefore Copilot connector page, and it's in English right now, but if I wanted to change languages to something else, I can just go to the top of the page. In the top right, I click one of these, the language button, which is this globe over here, and I can change it to something I'd be a bit more comfortable with. So I changed it to German. I'm still on the page. Didn't take me anywhere else. Additionally, any page will let users access a feedback form. So this is really helpful for us because this is how we find out there's something wrong with the help. We still have in this form the name and department here. This was from when they're not mandatory fields. This was from when we were only using this form internally. But for anyone providing feedback, the most important thing is to obviously fill out the mandatory fields, give us the topic URL you're referring to, and then select what kind of issue you're dealing with. This is really helpful, and it's continuously helped us improve the help over time. We also have, with this new help, an improved search. It's keyword based, like most searches are. So if you search for a keyword, the search will try to match what makes the most sense or what topics make the most sense in order of relevancy. But this search also gives us insight into what users are doing. So in the back end, we have access to what search terms are being used and whether or not they provide results. This is really helpful because we were able to spawn situations where something's being searched for and we know what the users want, but it's not giving them any results. So that lets us then add keywords or associate certain keywords with topics that we know should be getting brought up more often than they are. Another example of this data helping us was we noticed users are searching for API and Web API very frequently, as those are very frequent help resources to navigate to. But those are the last bits that haven't been migrated over to this new platform. So when users are searching for it here, they weren't getting any results. What we did was we added this custom result that will show up if users search for API, Web API, and other related terms. And it directs them to the old platform, but to the complete and up-to-date resources on API and Web API. So it helps us at least find stopgap solutions while the larger scale solutions being implemented. This, together with the feedback form, we believe will help users continuously inform us on what they need and where the help needs to go to continuously improve. The last thing I wanted to touch on was that if you're on the most recent version of Therefore and you've got a Therefore dialog open, pressing the help shortcut, which is the F1 button, will open on your browser the most relevant page on the new help for that dialog. So that lets you continuously or very seamlessly find the information you're looking for if you've opened a dialog and you don't really know what you're supposed to be doing there. So as far as the help goes and the new things, that's what I wanted to focus on. That's my brief overview of the new help. And we want to encourage you to use the feedback form if you struggle to find anything or understanding something. We're very committed to continuously improving the help, and your feedback is very valuable for that. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think these are really great enhancements. I know when you first showed me, I was really impressed, and we all know having good documentation at hand is really important. So
Exactly.
for everyone on the call, update your bookmarks. It's the URL has changed slightly, help.therefore.net /TFO. And of course, if you do open an old link, you can be you will be redirected to the newer ones as well. And also, I think you're updating the white papers as well. You're trying to incorporate content from
Yes.
white papers into the documentation
Mhm.
so that it's also easier to find information like that. Like,
Yes.
for example, the
Mhm.
scripting white paper, right? So
Yeah, some of
really,
that
really,
information we want to make sure it's
yeah,
really maybe it's a bit more incorporated into the new help
yeah,
because we know it can be tricky to find. We're going through reviewing all of our older content and updating it and then merging it into this new
yeah.
platform.
Thank you so much. This is so valuable. Um, right. So number one thing to make a great demo, don't be afraid to check the documentation if you get stuck, because we really do spend a lot of time and put a lot of efforts into making the documentation as good and as complete as possible. So now let's move on to the next main act of our Therefore Features Festival, the procurement. So I have created a procurement demo with the intention of showcasing newer Therefore features. The intention behind this demonstration is to showcase the Therefore features and not to necessarily say that this is the best practice for procurement. Just to be sure that the intention is clear, I'm not saying that this is the best method for um, procuring um, a procurement process. I'm really saying that this is just a demonstration that's somewhat realistic, but with the main intention really on the configuration and the training aspect of it. So the story behind the procurement demo is that somebody wants to buy a new item or service, and it must be internally approved before they can make before that purchase can be made. So we have this workflow here where a user submits an eForm, the status is then updated, and then the manager has to either reject the request, clarify the request, or approve it. If the purchase amount is underneath a certain threshold, it will go to the approval right away. If it's above a certain threshold, a secondary approval is required, where again, the secondary manager can either approve it or dispute it. The secondary manager can't outright reject it because the first manager already has approved it. And then the secondary manager, we're also saying if it's this more complex, more expensive item, getting multiple offers might be beneficial. If the secondary manager says yes, multiple offers would be beneficial, then an offer comparison workflow is started using a sub workflow process here. And this then starts a sub workflow where a procurement employee has to get multiple offers for this item or service, and then an AI call is made so that the offers can be compared. The reasoning behind this is that sometimes when you have very complex items or services that you're collecting offers for, the offers aren't easily compared because they're extremely complex. Oftentimes, this is in construction or for very complex services that aren't easily comparable. And in that case, it might be beneficial to have an AI compare the offers and make a judgment or help you compare them so that you can more easily judge which is the better deal. Finally, the results are returned. A human is asked to verify which item should be purchased or serviced. And then using the create new document task, a purchase um, order is created, and that can be then used to actually purchase the item or service. So it's hopefully realistic enough so that you can imagine it being used, somewhat. But of course, I'm not saying this is the optimal way or this is the way that it has to be done. Again, let's talk about the features and focus there. So again, this is the secondary sub workflow process with the REST call where the AI can compare the offers. And then finally, this is a confirmation email workflow, which is then sent when the payment is made. So what we will do is I will now present a video where we see this entire process working in the most complex way, where we get the different AI offers and we get them compared. And then I'm going to talk about the actual configuration of the demo. So let's watch the video, and then after I watch the video, we'll go step by step through so that you guys can really see how the configuration was done. Let me just make sure that I'm sharing my sound. I am. Good. Then let's watch the video.
Let's get started with the purchase request process. In this demo, Roman wants to submit a purchase request for LED screen equipment needed for the Demopalooza Music Festival his team is organizing. He opens the eForm, which automatically recognizes his name, email address, and the current date. He then manually enters his department. Next, he selects whether he wants to purchase a new item or service. When he selects item, an additional table appears where you can enter the item description, quantity, estimated cost, and optionally, a preferred supplier. The total estimated budget field automatically calculates the total value and populates the form. Next, he enters the required delivery date. The delivery date must be at least 2 days in the future, otherwise, the request cannot be submitted. Finally, he enters the reason for purchase before submitting the form. Now that the form has been submitted, it is saved to Therefore, which automatically starts the workflow. For demonstration purposes, all workflow tasks have been assigned to Roman. Let's take a look at the workflow history. You can see that the status of the request has been updated to new, and a manager has now the task of reviewing, rejecting, or requesting clarification on the purchase request. The manager also receives an email notification informing them that a new purchase request has been submitted. The manager opens the navigator, reviews the index data, and approves the request. Because the value of the requested item exceeds our predefined approval threshold, a second manager must also approve the purchase. Once again, our manager, played by Roman, receives the task and can approve the request or request clarification. Since the request has already been approved by the first manager, the second manager cannot reject it outright. The second manager also has the additional responsibility deciding whether multiple supplier offers should be obtained before proceeding with the purchase. The reasoning is simple. If the requested item or service is expensive or complex, it may be beneficial to compare offers from multiple vendors before making a decision. If the manager decides that the offer comparison would be valuable, a sub-workflow called offer comparison is started. The offer comparison workflow is assigned to an employee in the procurement department. The procurement employee receives instructions to obtain offers from various suppliers and save them to the category. In our example, the employee saves 2 quotations, one from Megastage and one from Apex Sound and Stage Production, into Therefore. Once the offers have been saved, a REST call to an AI service is initiated to compare the quotations. As you can see in the workflow history, the AI analysis takes only a few seconds to complete. The vendor table is then automatically populated with the AI's recommendation for the preferred supplier. The index data dialog now displays the AI recommendation along with a detailed comparison of each vendor's pricing, delivery terms, payment terms, and availability. Finally, a human reviewer can examine both the supplier offers and the AI recommendation before confirming which vendor should be selected. Once that manual task has been completed, the final task in the workflow creates a purchase order using the Create Document task. This task uses the index data stored in the category to populate a purchase order template automatically. The completed purchase order is saved to Therefore, where it can be used to initiate the purchasing process. Let's now assume the purchase order has been sent and the finance team has completed the payment. We now want to use a webhook so that Therefore is notified immediately when the payment is sent so that the records are always kept up to date. Here we have a category containing the purchase order for this item. As you can see, the payment date is currently blank. We will now send payment in the payment app, which will trigger the webhook. If we open the Therefore console and navigate to the webhooks view, we can see that the webhook was received successfully. Going back to the navigator, you'll now notice that the index data has been updated to show that the 6,175 euros has been paid.
All right. Very good. So that gives you hopefully a good understanding of the demo and the different features that we're going to be showing. So if you go, let's go back to this image here. This is a photograph that I took of one of the papers that I was working on before I started the configuration. And when you look at this, you can probably learn two things. The number one thing that you can learn is that I have horrible handwriting. I don't do a lot of handwriting anymore, but I do find it very useful to take the time to plan your demonstrations, plan your configurations out before you start moving them on and Therefore. You want to really understand what is the process, what are the conditions, and most importantly, what content, what information does your category need? Because category design is really the center of all Therefore for configurations. So categories should contain information that's known when information is first entered into the Therefore system, in our case, information from the eForm, when it's processed, which would be from the workflow, and then information necessary for transitions, searching, and statistics. So if I open up our Therefore system here, one thing that you can see is here is the purchase request category. And this is what the category looks like in Therefore. This information here comes from the eForm. This information here is populated by the AI when we have the offer comparison. And this information here is entered in the workflow. So we have this additional offers required, this checkbox. If you want to start the sub-workflow process, the purchase order status, this is a keyword field that's automatically updated as the purchase request is processed throughout the workflow. And then we have these boxes here in case there's a dispute or clarification needed for the reason for the purchase, and then also a reason for rejection. And so these are fields that are learned, that are populated optionally as this document is processed. So it really does save you a lot of time and effort to do proper planning so that you can have these fields created in the category so that they are available when you start configuring the workflow. Let's move on to all right, what is going on? Oh, there's a box open, that's why. Okay, now, so let's talk about eForms. There have been several smaller enhancements in eForms, and there are smaller things that I want you to keep in mind as you're doing your configuration in Therefore. So you might have noticed as soon as we open up the eForm, the first thing that gets populated automatically, here's the eForm again, is the requester name, the email, and the date of request. This is super helpful because it means that there's less manual work for a user to do. This is done using macros. So when you are, our first object was not macros here. Well, macros are here. So this is done when you enter a text field. Under the data tab, you can enter the default value here. This is documented using macros and eForms, and you just copy and paste these values into the default value box that you see there in the macros. Next is select components. Select components are those allow you to have drop downs. You can either manually enter the values that you want users to choose from, or you can also use a therefore keyword dictionary. If you are planning on mapping the eForm to a therefore keyword dictionary that has that is in therefore, you must use the therefore as the data source type. Because when you save to a category that has a keyword dictionary, it will only allow the values from that keyword dictionary to be saved to this index field. So you need to make sure that the eForm is also using that same keyword dictionary. Keyword dictionary in eForm needs to be mapped to keyword dictionary in therefore category. Okay, eForm to category both have to have the same. It sounds logical, but it's a very easy mistake to make. Another thing that's very interesting is under sorting. So when you have data in therefore, or data in your select components, you can select how it's going to be displayed. If it's going to be displayed alphabetically, so ascending is A through Z, descending is Z through A, or match source. So for example, in the eForm, we also had the priority here, the urgency. What you'll notice is it's low, medium, high, which makes sense, right? Because it's incremental, but it's not displayed alphabetically. It's displayed using match source, which means that and when I entered these values in from low, medium, high, it's going to be displayed in that same order, which makes the most sense, right? Because if I did it alphabetically, it would be high, medium, low, which makes no sense at all. So use this function for sorting so that you can really display the components, the elements in the right order. Another really interesting thing that most of you should be familiar with is conditional components. This was, for example, in the eForm when I said types of purchase. If I said if it's a item, then this occurs. And if I say service, it's not shown. So the way that this is configured is we say under the conditional tab, this component should display true when the form component type of purchase has the value item. This you have to manually type in. It is the API name of that item that you can see. So item in this case was not capitalized because that's how it's displayed in the eForm. I did just notice a question. Let me just quickly go to the Q&A here. Oh, very good. We did get a question and Francisco has been answering. That's wonderful. All right, okay, this is all about documentation. So guys, thanks so much for continuing the chat. I'll continue with some of the configuration here. All right, next was the JavaScript in eForm. So we had two occasions on this eForm that we showed where JavaScript was used. The first was to calculate the total value in the table. And again, you're going to go to the data tab, then scroll down to get to the JavaScript section and enter the JavaScript within there. So if I go here, I want to put that saving here. I'm going to go to edit so that I can show you here. And under the item total estimated budget, we're going to go here, data, under calculated data. This is where you're going to enter the JavaScript. So it's kind of hidden away. We also have JavaScript here to ensure that the required delivery date entered in the eForm is at least 2 calendar days in the future. I mean, it could be any arbitrary number of days. In the production system, we just chose to show that there's ways of restricting the entries to ensure that there's enough processing time. So basically, the delivery the enter delivery date is converted into a JavaScript date object. Both the delivery date and today's date are normalized to midnight so that the comparison is based only on the date and not the time of day. And then the script calculates the difference between the delivery date and today in days. And then if the delivery date is 2 days or more after the current date, the validation passes and returns as true. And if the delivery date is less than 2 days away, the validation fails and displays the message delivery date must be at least 2 days from today. So another really interesting and I think very valuable function that you can enter in your eForms to ensure that people aren't making these crazy last minute requests, right? Finally, when you have all of your eForm content ready, you need to map it to the therefore category so it can be saved in therefore. How to map? First, you need to fill in the test data. So you have to really just fill in test data first. Then you're going to see these data. It's going to say like JSON.getValue and then data requester. Requester is the name of the API field name. So if you're unsure what is in question, you can reopen the eForm and look at the API names to help you with the mapping. One thing is really important to note is that if you're using keyword dictionaries, they will always have 2 different values pop up. In my eForm, I was using a keyword dictionary for department. And you'll see here, department is visible, and then again, department with NO at the back. Department NO refers to the department number, the keyword ID number. We want to be matching department because we want the text to be saved to therefore. So when you do the mapping, always map the actual name of the keyword and not the number field. All right. So this concludes the tips and tricks that I have for the eForm configuration. We're going to now move on to the workflow. I'm just going to quickly check to see if there's any questions. Okay, lots of questions and feedback for Francisco about the documentation. I'm going to continue on with the configuration. If you guys have configuration questions, I'll answer those verbally because I can't type and talk at the same time. So we're going to move on to workflow. So again, I said this at once, but I'm going to say it again. Every workflow begins with the category. You can only use information in your workflow configuration that you have in your category. All right, so when you begin configuring your workflow, the category configuration must go first. I'm going to assume that you guys here already know how to create a category and know how to have the different index fields. So that's very important. So what we have here is, let's draw our attention to the workflow emails. These are used in both informing users that a new task has been assigned to them, but also informing users outside that something has occurred within the Therefore system. So there are a couple of new features or newer features that are really interesting. Number one is we now have rich text and HTML, so it's much easier to create really nice looking emails than it was in the past because you can add pictures, images, different fonts, bold, paragraphs, and this kind of stuff really easily in this nice editor. If you click on here, the code view, you can also do direct HTML integration. You can also share the documents that are in Therefore very easily. You can use a share link to share those documents using the share link so that you're not actually sending the physical document through the email. And you can even add a password so that there's a little bit more protection. And then the password can even include a macro, such as the user's date of birth, so that the password is dynamically changed depending on who receives that email. So it's very, very interesting and very easy to configure and make these very nice dynamic emails now. Under transition conditions, so transition, it's hard to say, transition conditions tell the system under which condition the workflow should progress. So what we have here is, number one, is we were using this checkbox to say additional offers are required. So what you'll recall is we had the additional offers that was used to route the workflow if the second manager said additional offers was required. They checked that box, and then the sub workflow was initiated. Because checkboxes use a separate logic, I just want to review it here. If the box is ticked, it has a value of 1, and if it's unticked, it has a value of 0. We also have here, you see the invoice approval threshold is used in the condition here. This is done using our new system variables, which was introduced in 2026. They are now available under like a macro. So that's makes them very easy to implement. System variables allow variables to be used throughout the therefore system, and they're especially useful for workflows that you intend to use on several systems, because it means that instead of going into every condition and to every script and to every REST call where that variable is used, you only have to adjust it once underneath the system variables node, and it will then apply everywhere throughout the therefore system where it's used. So here, for example, we were using this approval threshold here, which in our case was at 5,000. But if I wanted to change it to 10,000, I would only need to change it here in the system variable, and I wouldn't need to remember all of the different conditions where I had used it previously. So that makes it much easier to make these configurations transportable throughout different systems. A really good new feature from Therefore 2026. Now, after you finish configuring a workflow, you'll see these process properties. So I just wanted to give another overview to this screen here, because this has a lot of information and there are also new features in here as well. So what we see is number 1, this checkbox process disabled. This checkbox will be checked automatically if at any point you need to save the workflow in an unfinished state. And if you later save the workflow, and even if you click Save and Activate, process disabled is not automatically unchecked. You need to manually uncheck it in order for this workflow to be used. Can be started manually. This is an option that allows a user to take a workflow, take a document, right-click on the document and say Start Workflow. If this is unchecked, you can only then start a workflow automatically if a new document is saved to the Therefore system. I think Can be started manually is a very good option to keep checked if you are doing demos, because it allows you to have extremely fine control of when the workflow starts. Send email notifications. This means that users are actually going to be informed when a workflow task is assigned to them via email. Then we have a new option here called block workflow level comments. So this is a new option since Therefore 2026. This means that users can now leave comments on a document level, a case level, and a workflow level. Some users found it confusing that a comment that they left on a workflow was not visible when they were simply viewing the document. To avoid this confusion, we now allow administrators to block workflow level comments only. Users can still make comments on a document level, but not the workflow level. Of course, you can also disable the comments feature entirely within the Solution Designer, but here you can block workflow level comments specifically. And finally, the last option that I want to explain is delete finished workflow instances after a certain amount of days. The function here is that when you look at your workflow inbox, if you have a whole bunch of finished workflow processes, it can be overwhelming. It can kind of visually clutter up your workflow view in your navigator. And if you delete the workflow instances after a certain amount of days, then they will simply disappear and they will no longer appear in your list of workflow tasks. The important thing to note is that it doesn't delete the documents, and you can also retain the workflow history, so a record of what workflow tasks happened, by whom, at what time, because that is important for audit purposes, especially in production systems. So here, for example, you have save workflow history to the main document, and you can also select to include comments or not. So you're not losing any of the traceability or security that the workflow provides. You're simply freeing up the finished processes from cluttering up your workflow inbox. Another important screen that you might be familiar with are all these save process options. I know this is something that is quite confusing at times, and so I do want to cover this really briefly. So if you have a workflow, say like you have an invoice approval workflow, that is the workflow process. However, there can be different versions of that same process. When you update the version, it means that you are staying with the same version that you have right now. If you save as a new version, instead of having version 1, you can then also have version 2. Administrators can reroute workflows to different versions. And if you're saving a workflow and you don't know what to choose, if you only make small changes within the workflow, for example, you change the text of an email that's sent, something like that, you can update the version. However, if you add new tasks or change the transitions, you make more substantive changes, then you should save it as a new version. And always remember, save and activate or update and activate will not uncheck the process disabled checkbox. You still manually need to do that. And as you can see here, when you have the administrators in your Therefore system can reroute the processes to different ones, version 1 or version 2, etc. And that is the reason why we have different versions, so that administrators can precisely choose when they want the changes to take effect by having these different versions, and by giving them precise control of when the version should be activated. The admin really can control how and when a certain version of a workflow is actually used. We also are using in this demo workflow, we also have this workflow process called start a new workflow. So this is used to start a sub-process to decrease the complexity and make troubleshooting workflows easier. So it has to use the same category as the main workflow, which is why we have in our Therefore system, everything is from the same category. And in order for this to be used, you first configure the main workflow, but then in order to use this task, the sub workflow must already be completed, because it has to be available from the available workflows associated with that main category. So you need to then finish configuring the sub workflow completely before you can then finish configuring the main workflow. Does that make sense? So in terms of, as an admin, you're going to start configuring the main workflow, stop, fully configure the sub workflow, and then finish configuring the main workflow again. I'm just going to check to see, I don't see any questions. And then finally, we have the REST call. So this is our sub workflow process. We have moved the AI offer comparison to its own workflow. The one is because whenever you do a REST call to a AI service, sometimes the AI services are unreachable. They might take a long time to return a query. Usually it's quite fast, but every once in a while, something strange happens and it just takes longer than expected. And so for that reason, it's beneficial, I think, to have these REST calls, especially to third-party AI services, to be in their own workflow. This just makes troubleshooting much easier, because you can then very clearly see exactly where the error is coming from and at what time it's coming. What you see here is you see a screenshot of the script that was, the prompt that was sent to the AI. The script prepares a detailed prompt that's sent to an AI service via the REST call. The goal is to have the AI compare multiple vendor offers, score them against the predefined criteria, and return a recommended supplier. So what you see here is the script is extracting the text from the 2 documents. Attached to the workflow, we saw the different offers being saved, and then it's using this new function called get document text. And what you see here is get document text. This is going to be from the 2nd document that's saved in that category, and then also from the 3rd document in that category. And the reason is because we assume that the eForm itself is going to be the 1st document that's saved that category. Then we have this prompt here, and it's then asking the AI to review the vendor offers and assign a unique vendor ID to each supplier, and then calculate a weighted score based on the price, payment terms, availability, delivery time. and then explain the recommendation in 2 or 3 sentences. And that ensures the AI's response is structured and it can be used by subsequent workflow steps without requiring manual interpretation. Then the script replaces the placeholders in the template with the actual values. And so basically the script enables, therefore, to automate the first stages of the supplier evaluation. Instead of manually comparing multiple quotations, the workflow sends the offer data to an AI service, which returns a structured comparison, a weighted score for each supplier, and recommendations for the best overall offer. So yeah, that is the REST call. And then on the response handling, we then save the response back as index data to therefore. So a really good and nice example of how you can use this new function, get document text, also new from therefore 2026. I don't see any questions or comments. All right, so I'm going to continue. I know we're short on time, but this is just so much. It's hard to get everything in. All right. Oh, good question from Craig. Roman, maybe you can help me answer this. Can you dynamically get the number of documents that are used in the get document text call rather than hard coding? I haven't seen that done yet. I don't know. Roman, what do you think? Maybe you can type the answer to Craig's question. In the meantime, I'm going to continue on with explanations about this next workflow task called create document task. So this final task of the workflow automatically adds a new document into a category, and the new document could be empty, but it can contain a PDF, Microsoft Word, or Excel template file, and it's filled in with index data from the source category. So this is really interesting because it allows you to create documents that are dynamically populated with information from your category. So number one is you need a template document. So you either need a Word template file or Excel template file or PDF template file. It's then saved automatically to the templates category. This is a system category. So when you first get your therefore system, this category already exists by default. And then you set it up, you use the document creation task, you map the fields from your category and your template file. And then you also select where that document should be saved. In this case, it's saved to a new category called purchase order. And now in our final session, we're talking about webhooks. So webhooks are a completely new feature in Therefore that was released in our spring release. Webhooks allow for instant communication between Therefore and a third-party service. So they're mechanisms, they send information in real time to Therefore. So when information changes in the third-party app, information in Therefore is updated immediately. When Therefore receives the webhook, it can update index information, create a new document, trigger the content connector, or update the referenced web services. And webhooks function completely outside of a workflow. They don't use a REST call. It's really as soon as the information is sent in the third-party app or service, Therefore gets it almost immediately. How can you know if a webhook is supported in your webhook is supported, or when should you know that webhooks is a good choice? Number one is you need real-time updates between a third-party application and Therefore. Like payment is sent, you want Therefore to be updated immediately. Or a new customer is added in your CRM system, right? Or a payment is received in your ERP system, you want Therefore to be also noted. The external application supports webhooks. So refer to the vendor documentation. Again, you can just do a quick Google search with the name of that application with webhooks, and it should come up right away. And this update should occur independently of a workflow, so you're not going to be using a REST call to exchange that information. And the incoming data and the resulting action and Therefore are clearly defined. So what I mean by that is when Therefore receives this information, you need to already have a clear idea of what do you want Therefore to do with it. Do you want index data to be updated? Do you want a document maybe to be saved? So then you could trigger the content connector to to look for that document, it should be a very clearly defined process. Then to configure the actual webhooks, it's actually quite, and in most cases, it's quite simple because the third-party provider will have documentation. They will tell you what is the signature header. They will tell you where to enter like the endpoint. So you're going to basically be copying and pasting the information between therefore and this service. So it's a lot of copying and pasting. You're going to select a shared secret key here in therefore and enter that same shared secret key in your third-party service. Then you can use the console. We have a new webhooks view to see if the webhook is working. And for the first couple of times, we recommend to include the payload in the log, which is just a full record of exactly what was sent and received. But when you notice the webhook is working, it's not recommended to include the payload anymore. Any more? All right, then Roman, any more tips and tricks that you can say about webhook configuration?
I don't know, like, in this demo we used like, maybe I can just share the
Yeah, I'll stop sharing. Yeah.
screen.
So
in this demo, basically, for demo purposes, this was the fastest way. I mean, without having any accounts, we used like a webhook payload generator,
yeah,
where basically you could select different providers from here, like Stripe or I don't know, PayPal or any, and then you can test it. In reality, of course, you could use the ERP system like in our e-learning. We have one example with ERP Next, and I could use the webhook directly connected to the ERP system. But in this case, this was a bit easier because you can create the custom events. For instance, in this case, we just basically you can generate the unique signature, use the custom header that you can see over here, and then also the test endpoint from therefore. So basically, this is how the webhook was configured on our end. So we just the endpoint that we got here and the signature header from the provider we placed over here, defined the action, and we just use it, for testing. This is basically the easiest way because you don't need to have any demo or test accounts. I don't know,
yeah.
and if there are any specific questions. So this was just used in this demo to respond to Greg's question regarding the get document text property. As I said, I didn't test that myself, but with the script, I guess that you can go through the loop and find, like a file count property, and then maybe try to find going through the loop. And if you want to take exactly the certain document from the file, just define it in the script. If you use the default option 0, it means that it will take the content from all the documents from the file, which we probably don't want to do it. Imagine that you have 10 documents, so sending to AI unnecessary, extracted text from the document probably, would consume some tokens which are not needed. And also you ask for I think the question if you can use the the therefore web API probably, yeah, with some get document or get document stream where you can have the file count property, and again use the script to reach to the file stream that you need.
Thank you, Roman.
Yeah.
Any more questions from our audience? No? All right, then I will just quickly share my screen. We've covered all the content. I've gone through all of the main aspects that I wanted to cover in the configuration. So guys, thank you for all of your questions. I see Francisco was very active in answering questions about documentation plans for the future. And yeah, Craig also suggests webhook.site is another good one for generating payloads. So webhooks are included with every version of Therefore 2026. They don't cost anything extra, so you can really experiment with them. Try to configure a webhook using one of these webhook generators sites. And I think the webhooks are a really great enhancement because they really do enable instant communication between Therefore and the other app or service, enabling you to really keep the data completely up to date. So we've now gone through the entire configuration. I've shown you some tips and tricks and things to watch out for. If you're interested in this configuration, send me an email. And other than that, I'll see you next month for our next webinar. Guys, thank you so much for choosing to spend your morning with us. It really means a lot. Oh, I got 2 more questions here. What's what we have here? Great webinar as always. Thank you, team Therefore. Thank you very much. I'm happy to do it. If you guys have any requests for new features or any requests for other webinar topics, I'm really happy to hear from you. So once again, thank you so much, and thank you for all of the nice messages. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you. The video will be sent. I will post the video on our YouTube channel just right now, and then I'll send the link in the Zoom responses. So we will make sure that you get a chance for this. And if you want the XML file, I can also make that available as well. So guys, thanks again. Right, bye-bye, and that's it.